We're still looking at the Bayelsa elections and matters arising with regards to the election. And with us in the studio is one of the election observers, Keda. Keda, it's a pleasure having you on SaharaTv again.
It's my pleasure.
Observers have criticized the pivotal vote that took place in Bayelsa and Kogi State recently. Yeah, some have even dubbed it as one of the dirtiest elections in Nigerian history in recent times.
No controversy.
You are an observer on the ground. What's your view on that?
Well, I haven't been privileged to have observed not less than 7 elections in Nigeria at various stages. I want to say that the worst of the scenarios that have been witnessed during the elections in this country was what I personally witnessed in Bayelsa State and what observers from my organization witnessed in Kogi State and parts of Bayelsa State on Saturday. I want to say it without any fear of favor this afternoon that the outcome of Bayelsa State governorship election and Kogi State on Saturday was purely determined by thugs aided by security agents, particularly the police. When the wishes and aspirations of the people are not allowed to manifest from the point of ballot, then whatever comes out of such process does not enjoy the legitimacy of the majority of the people. And under a democracy, like it has been popularly defined, this should have been a government of the people, by the people, for the people. But in this case, it is becoming a government of some few, enthroned by the thugs, not to pretend over the people. Having been privileged to be in Bayelsa State for 11 days through pre-election activities, series of engagement with stakeholders, and monitoring all sort of pre-election activities conducted by INEC, I want to say that INEC, on its part, did the best it could in delivering logistics, personnel, and ensuring that the process runs without any hitch. But you see, we are currently in a situation whereby INEC has not been allowed to work as an independent agency, as an independent commission, because no matter how brilliant the effort of INEC is, at the point of the role, playing their role, other stakeholders that make up the electoral chain, the voters, the candidates, the electoral umpire, the security agencies have very fundamental role in conduct of election, especially in volatile states like Kogi and Bayelsa. Bayelsa is a peculiar terrain because this is a state, that is surrounded by water. A lot of the communities are not accessible by road, so it becomes challenging, even for electoral umpires, to coordinate, effective delivery of their mandate, especially with security in those places. And what did we witness? We witnessed a situation whereby the police and thugs practically hijacked the role of INEC. At places during that election, we find, even electoral officials not being allowed to embark on their job. And at the end of the day, what did we see? We saw, one over-bloated, very ridiculous figure being announced as a result. Let me tell you where we are today. As we speak, I was in 6 of the 8 local government of Bayelsa State before the election. I traveled not less than 3 times on the waters before the election. And I want to say that as we speak, not less than 80% of all the communities I visited in Bayelsa State are currently submerged. In fact, there are communities where there are no inhabitants. As I speak with you this morning in Bayelsa State, because the state is flooded, the water level has risen to a point that even in Yenigua, the state capital, there are communities that are still submerged as of this morning in the state capital. So you can begin to imagine when people now begin to turn out figures in an unprecedented manner. I was in Bayelsa State during the 2015 governorship election. I was in Bayelsa State, in some other elections, the State House Assembly election. And I want to say this, that what we witnessed was a situation whereby local government, where in the past hundreds of votes are brought in, local government where the maximum votes ever produced. And remember, there was no continuous voters registration before this election. Came turning in votes amounting to 80,000, 100,000,
Wow. So what you are saying in essence is that there are strong indications that the election results in Bayelsa
were mainly manufactured by politicians who were aided by the security agencies, particularly the police. And it's very unfortunate because, like for instance, we were denied access to many communities.
Exactly. For example, we had cases that, observers were denied access
even journalists.
And journalists were denied access to Nembe, Ogbia, Southern.
And how do you justify an election that does not have the attention of the media and observers? How do you tell the world that you had an election where election observers are held hostage, some released at about 9 p.m.? How do you justify that there was an election in communities where thug mounted barricade and were not allowed access in as election observers, but very ridiculous because we even had foreign monitors on our train during that election. We're prevented from having access to these communities by thug in the full glare of presence of policemen who were ordinarily supposed to be in charge of the security of elections. But majority of people who were in charge of security of elections were thugs who were aided by these people. And unfortunately, this did not happen only in the rural communities. Even in Nienegua, the state capital, there were incidents of gunshots to disperse people from where they were voting. So the people's will did not manifest, and the few places where people were allowed or where elections held, would not have turned out a quarter of the result that is called the result of the governorship election in that state today.
Let's get this. In order to put this on a proper perspective, as an observer, from what are the observers' mission's mandate in this? I'm talking about your organization, and what are the major achievements at the end of the polls? Could you also probably shed more light on the methodology that was used in covering this election?
Well, one of the obligations we have as election observers is to monitor the process. For instance, distribution of materials, how equitable are they, how properly are they done, the conduct of election officials, how prompt were they in getting to their polling stations, are they following the process as stipulated by INEC in terms of accreditation of voters, how is vote counted, and and all sort of. So our duty as observers is to monitor how the process in its entirety is conducted. And INEC as a commission over the years have worked with civil society organizations who observe this election, get report from us, and it has guided the commission in a lot of ways in preparing for future elections in this country. INEC has taken serious the recommendations of local monitors and international monitors in addressing fundamental shortcomings even in the conduct of the commission and its personnel in elections. And it has really helped in improving on our capacity to conduct election in this country, because the commission does not have all it takes to give a perfect election. But opinions of stakeholders who are engaged in the process of election has really helped the commission. That is what our job as election observers becomes very important. And the INEC has not been taking it for granted. But the role of the non-state actors who are becoming dominant and are practically taking over the business of election is the issue here. The political thugs, the politicians, many of them who are even actively engaged by government, and compromise and the collaboration on the part of the security agencies. I keep repeating police because primarily it is the police that has that primary job of supervising elections, giving election security. In fact, at points in this country, we have criticized and we have condemned the use of military in our elections. Every other paramilitary forces comes in to give support to INEC. On ground in Bayelsa, we had men of the Customs Service, Immigration, even the Federal Road Safety Corps, where the Nigerian Correctional Service, prisons, were all there to give. But primarily, it is the job of the police to monitor polling stations, and INEC, institutions around elections. But in this case, the police abandoned this duty, handed it over to political thugs, armed militias, and they became, the dominant factor in that election. And it is quite unfortunate, very unfortunate and ridiculous, to read from the police hierarchy yesterday that the people who disrupted Bayelsa and Kogi elections were thugs. Thugs disrupted election where this country deployed over 55,000 policemen, 57,000 policemen. How do we tell the world this? That we had 32,156 policemen deployed to Bayelsa, 35,000 in Kogi State, and thugs in how many numbers? Held 32,000 men hostage? How do we justify that? By my calculation, by my layman calculation, each polling unit during this election, going by the deployment of policemen alone, not other security agents, should have about 10 to 12 to 14 policemen. By the virtue of the number of police. That is for police. Then we had the army, we had immigrations, we had customs, we had the navy, all of them on the ground for this election. So where were the 14 policemen per unit expected, or what were they, the 2,000 policemen, where were they during this election that thugs took over and the police? And the most worrisome and the saddest of the turn of the whole event is that as I speak to you this morning, sir, no single person, not one individual, is in police net as a result of the anarchy that was unleashed on the people of Bayelsa and Kogi on Friday. People were killed in Bayelsa, people were macheted, people were thrown into water, and were this done by faceless people? If you say thugs are fake policemen, if you say thugs are faceless, what about their sponsors, the politicians in whose houses ballot papers were being printed in Bayelsa State? Are they faceless also? How will the police, for this number of days, not been able to arrest somebody among these leading politicians who were going to the polling unit, with thugs, molesting people, breaking ballot and hijacking election materials till this morning? It is very, very unfortunate for us.
Shouldn't INEC be, auditing the results of the polls, especially in Bayelsa and Kogi, at this time?
Well, that looks more like one of the reasons why we should begin to demand and advocate for a reform in our electoral system. We operate a very backward electoral system and electoral law, which gives so much power to the returning officer, even above the chairman of INEC. The law which return these characters as governors today is such that the moment they are declared winner at that local level, it's only the court. And that is why a lot of people believe, they will tell you, our own is to get the result, you can go to court. Before you say the next thing, you can go to court. So now we must begin to look at how we can reform this electoral system in order to prevent us from, because let me tell you the fear here, that many of these perpetrators do not understand. By the time, if by accident, you end up achieving your one-party state by hijacking the elections and killing everybody to win all the elections, and you have all the states in your kitty, you have the presidency in your kitty, and every other thing. Now the war will become an internal war, because you have empowered the thugs, you have emboldened non-state actors. Remember, there will always be need to select candidates from political parties. Question of internal democracy. So by the time you will not come and fight your major opposition party or the people who are innocent that you have to chase away, from the polling station, then you now come inward and begin to kill yourself on who becomes the candidate of that party that is solely ruling the state and the country. So anybody that is genuine, anybody that is interested in the future of this country must be part of this demand for electoral reform. Because if we don't demand for electoral reform, if we don't, work towards making INEC truly independent, like we have in countries like India, for example, where the institution of election has its own security, has its own, every agency is working for election in India are so independent that you don't need the conventional, state police to conduct election. And that's why, because here, the chairman of INEC cannot even invite a constable and ask questions. And auditing election becomes difficult when power is so much concentrated in the hand of returning officers. So we must look at a holistic, review of this electoral process, electoral law, and work out credible means of conducting election, and we must at this time begin to advance. People keep giving us sort of excuse. Today, virtually all human beings in Nigeria now can use a mobile phone. We should begin to think about moving towards that age where our election has to go electronic. This idea of having to kill people.
That's exactly where I'm actually coming to. Like beyond prioritizing this, electoral reforms. Many politicians and analysts have also called for blockchain voting, electronic voting. We would like to get your view on this. As a matter of fact, beyond just prioritizing electoral reforms, shouldn't we also look at other means of voting in order to end this so-called electoral impunity, strengthen the democratic institutions, and also deepen the culture of the democratic process itself?
It's inevitable at this point, and every Nigerian, I want to say, that is interested in his own life, because the next victim may not necessarily be the target. It could be stray bullet, it could be anything. So as much as people struggle to get the PVCs, as much as people struggle and wait for the next 4 years, I want to believe that Nigerians must join the call and be actively involved in demanding for credible elections, and going through the electronic voting system is one sure way out that will reduce a lot, to a reasonable extent, election malpractices in this country. We may not need to wait any longer for ballot papers to come and get hijacked by thugs, aided by politicians, like we witnessed in Bayelsa on Saturday. By the time we begin to advance, we may pick it up in stages. It may start from, it may not be, when we started cashless banking in this country, it never started everywhere. When mobile telecommunication came, it never, covered 100%. So I think we should begin to look at how we can adopt this system that will reduce us a lot of energy, that will reduce a lot of risk that is being taken in election management in Nigeria, and that will also ensure that people have the real power to elect their leaders. A lot of people who are in position in Nigeria today are not actually having the mandate of the people, because they are product of guns and barrels.
Kedah, finally, how optimistic are you about the future of democracy in Nigeria, especially with regards to elections?
Democracy will not only survive even with credible election. Democracy will survive when we respect every other attribute, every other ingredient that makes a democracy, including the freedom of association, the freedom of expression, and the freedom of Nigerians, to freely choose who they like. So I want to believe that as much as we work towards electoral reform, we must also continue to insist that the right of Nigerians must be respected. Human right is fundamental, it is given, and nobody should take it away from Nigerians. And people have right to associate, and people have right to express themselves. And on a final note, I want to ask that the federal government should free Omoyele Sowore. He's a prisoner of conscience and he should be released.
Kedah, thank you very much for your insightful analysis.
It's my pleasure.